And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here back with another AFL round review. And joining me in the co-host seat, a very well-known face to the podcast, a great gentleman who I just had about a half an hour conversation with before we even got started, Mr. Brian Barrish. Brian, great to have you back, sir.
I'm glad we didn't start recording until just now. That's all I'm going to say about that. But good day, Donnie. How's it going, mate?
It is not doing too bad. We have just finished what I would have to say, sir, has been one of the most interesting rounds of footy I think I have ever seen, because the one word that just literally epitomizes this round is upset. So thoughts on round 20, because like I said, I tipped, and I at least think I'm at least good tipper, and I got 3 out of 9.
Yeah, I remember seeing a post from the AFL from the AFL social media, and it was like, okay, seriously, which of the 200 of the thousands of you that played actually tipped six? Like, you're joking.
I know I was listening to a podcast as a Daisy Thomas on one of the Triple M podcasts goes, if you got more than 3 right, you know nothing about footy. I just had to crack up because it was almost so appropriate, because like you sit there and you go through it. I know when I did my tips, I'm like, I thought there were some pretty good tips, but I don't think anybody expected what we saw this weekend. So let's dive our teeth right into it. I mean, this one I could kind of see happening, but it did come as a little bit of a shock as Carlton go into the MCG, the cauldron of the Magpies, and get a 93-76 win over the Pies. The Carlton Blues have started to find some form at the perfect time.
Yeah, if you're going to get hot, it's got to be at the end of the season when you're in the top eight, and or at least within sniffing distance. One thing that sports has taught us in the last decade, and it doesn't matter if it's AFL, it doesn't matter if it's baseball, it doesn't matter if it's Major League Soccer, which I'm sure is a deep dive for some of you. If you can get yourself into the playoffs and you start playing your best of the season, then you are in it with the same amount of chance that everybody else has. But just it was a pretty. I feel like it was a pretty balanced effort. There wasn't really any players, like, especially looking at the disposal stats. Nick Newman had 27. Blake Akers, Adam Serra, and Patrick Cripps all had 20 or more. But that's it. Everybody contributed. I would say of the 22 guys, 20 of them all had double figures, and then Charlie Curnow goes off for half a dozen. Um, you know, I think if Collingwood was going to trip up, this would be the case. They still have 3 more games left in the season, but and there are still 2 games ahead of Port Adelaide, and of course we'll talk about that in a moment. But you're right. I mean, Carlton all of a sudden has really come on. They have a half-game lead, 2 points over the Bulldogs, now sitting in seventh. And I mean, just looking at who they've got next, they have St Kilda next, they've got Melbourne next at the G, and then they finished out up at Carrara against the Suns. They, I mean, they're. I don't think obviously they're too far back from the top four, but they could be as high as fifth at the end of this by the time the finals start.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. But another thing that a topic that I caught a few of the podcast talking about is, honestly, I think this gives a lot of teams under Collingwood that they're beatable. They're not this undefeated giant, this unbeatable giant. If you get after them, if you force them to play defense a lot more, you can kind of wear them down and you can open them up. They have a great defense. I think they've got at least 2 defenders there that I think are really good shots of being all Australian this year. But when you can pump it in and keep it in there for long periods of time, and you force Collingwood to be accurate, which they were not accurate
No,
at times this year, and that really hurt them too. This Collingwood team is still there to be beaten, and this is the Carlton team that on their day can be absolutely lethal. The thing that scares me with Carlton is that Walsh is now hurt. You've still got some injuries. Can they get to finals and get healthy at the right time? There is still a month left to play, so there's still plenty to play for. But this was an incredible game of footy. I woke up specifically just to watch this game because I thought I'm not going to miss this one. I think this is going to be an absolute cracker, and I was not disappointed at all at this performance. Again, Collingwood's a great team, but I think Carlton's starting to find their groove at the right time, which should scare a lot of teams in the bottom part of the eight and even some of the top four teams because this Carlton team on a roll can go far. So let's jump to it, sir. That was a great game, but here starts the run. I mean, one upset. Now we go to upset number two that I don't think anybody in their right mind saw coming. Fremantle has been reeling. They have played horrible footy the last few rounds. They go to the Cattery and they knock off the defending premiers 71-64. And I know some people are going to go, well, they lost Blitzovs early. They lost Hawkins. You still had some really good talent on this Fremantle team and on this Geelong team, and Fremantle get the win. This one shocked me more is because I thought the Cats were starting to find their groove. Now, I later learned about the Blitzovs injury, which I think really hurts them because of the lack of production after danger. So I'm worried now. Are the Cats on life support? Their finals chances on life support right now?
I mean that's gonna be tough. I don't think they're playing their best. They haven't looked. I don't think they've looked consistently on all season. I don't think they've had the same like killer instinct over the course of the entire 20 games so far that they've had in that run last year. But if you look at where they stand, I mean, first of all, let's be honest, they're only 2 points out of the eight right now. So their run home is they host Port Adelaide, a team that is coming off of a big loss themselves. Then they head to the G to play Collingwood, and then they finish the season at Marvel against St Kilda. These are all teams in the top eight. I would say on paper, you figure they probably have to win two out of those three. If Blitzovs is out for a bit, and if they don't get as consistent as they have been in the last, if they play the way that, like, especially in this game, then yeah, I think they miss out. But I think these are winnable games. I think, like I said, I think like two of these games I think might be winnable, but I mean not the way they're playing at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And remember, because of gather round, they're actually to the 24th round and not much easier as they host the Western Bulldogs at GMHBA in round 24.
Uh, all
So
right.
yeah, that I'm not trying to contradict you.
No,
There are 4 rounds left.
I
So
just
there's that last one.
I listen, I went to a Philly public school. We could only count the 23.
But no, it's I completely I'm honestly that is it's not easy. Now having the home ground advantage I think will be great, but not easy matchups there. So I'm a tiny bit worried for the Catters there, just a little bit, because that one I think a lot of people kind of notched in the win column for them against Fremantle, a Port team coming that's struggling, a little bit injury prone. We'll discuss that a little bit more a little bit later, but this is a Cats team that the injuries that they sustained could be death nails, and that's why I'm a tiny bit scared of that. So we
Yeah.
jump up to Mars Stadium, where an upset for many some people's call, just because I think the Giants have been disrespected a lot this year, and the Giants really showed, hey, put some respect on the Giants' name as they go into Mars Stadium in Ballarat and get a 5 point win over the Doggies. Toby Green, you superstar again. I may be a Sydney Swan supporter, but I got to give Toby Green some love here. Another fantastic game. And the Giants, yes, the Giants are in the finals right now. And oh my gosh, I don't think anybody saw this going into the start of this year that the Giants, with 4 rounds to go, would be in the finals with a chance to play finals footy this year.
Yeah, you kind of have to, you kind of have to look at you kind of have to look at this in a certain way. I mean, this is a huge game. It's two teams that were sitting right on the cusp of the eight. And it was a tussle for most of the game. I mean, the Bulldogs actually led this at halftime by 29, and then 6 goals to 3 in the third quarter, and that's what really cut them down. They were down at all three changes, and then came from behind. You're right, Toby Green, and played an extraordinary game. And let's not kid ourselves. Mars is essentially it's a straight out home game in the same way that Cardinia is a home game or GMHBA for Geelong, and the way that Carrara is essentially a home game for Manica rather for GWS. This was a home game for the Bulldogs, and GWS went to Ballarat and beat them. If this is might be the start of a run for them, and again, they're in a very similar situation to Carlton. Even though they're a half game ahead, they're 2 points ahead. They're 8 points out. I don't know that they can make the four, but I mean they're in a good position to host an elimination final and maybe get a little momentum, maybe make a little run, maybe catch if they're able to win. But as you said, the way that Green is playing and the way that some of these other guys are playing, I mean, Riccardi kicking 3 goals in a fantastic effort. Canelio, I mean, Canelio, a ball magnet again, even though he was second behind Whitfield with 34 disposals. Whitfield had 36, but you have to say that. Now, as far as the Bulldogs are concerned, if we look at at where they are, they host Richmond at the Docklands before they go to Tasmania to play the Hawks. And then round 23, they come back to play West Coast. Well, that should be a victory, you would think. However, I'm not sure about anything anymore. And then they head to the Cattery to finish things off. I mean, I don't think they're in trouble yet, but again, I think they got to win at least 2 of those in order to really kind of have a chance.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. This Sydney Derby is quite the fun one this week because both teams really need to win to kind of cement where they want to be. But a loss isn't going to kill them, but it's definitely going to hurt a lot of momentum for either side, no matter what happens there.
And
So,
and before you jump on that, let's see. I actually now know the name of the stadium because I was trying to look up what their record was at Eureka Stadium. I'm surprised. I thought they had played more there. This is only their 11th match there, and they have a record of 7-4. Not
mhm.
impenetrable, but you know, this is the fourth time they've lost at Ballarat. So that's a huge win for the G-men.
All right, now we jump up Heritage Bank Stadium with another massive surprise for many people because I think a lot of people thought when Stewie Doo left, well, the Gold Coast they're gonna mail it in, they're gonna get through it. Well, nobody told Coach King and the Gold Coast Suns because they knock off the heavily favored Lions 96-55, a 41-point win. And wow, oh wow, the Lions, this had to be a shock to them. This really damages their possibility of maybe slipping into the second spot. And I gotta say this makes me think that what was Stewie Do not doing, or what has gotten into the Suns, because I mean this was a win that came out of absolutely nowhere.
I tend to think that when you go through a situation like that, the team tends to play a little bit looser. Um, let's make no mistake. They're sitting in what is that? They're sitting in 18, 17, 16, 15. They're sitting in 14th place
14th.
right now. They're also only 4 points out of the eight.
Mm-hmm.
How nuts is that? I think when something like that happens, it feels like you essentially have nothing to lose. I mean, so you tend to play a little bit more loosely. You tend to pay a little bit, you don't have the pressure just yet. You don't have that. So they just went out and I think they played they played a much better game than the Lions did. And even, Sam Flanders with 32 disposals, Noah Anderson, Tuke Miller, whose dad is from Ohio. There's that American connection for you. And then and again, just spreading everything out. Ben King with five goals. Brisbane, I think, was kept largely in check. I think they kept the forwards were pretty much. I mean, Charlie Cameron did. I mean, 2 goals, two for the game. And Gold Coast. I mean, it was kind of cagey in the beginning, but Gold Coast in that fourth quarter with those 5 goals to seal it, it's going to take a lot. And we look at their rest of their schedule. They are at Adelaide in round 21, and then round 22 they're at Sydney before coming home against Carlton, and then going to Tasmania to play North Melbourne. That is a brutal, brutal schedule in terms of traveling. They're basically going up and down the East Coast. Um, that's going to be very, very difficult. But if they play like they played, I mean, it depends. And there's some good teams in there. But if they play the way that they played against the Lions and they get some help, they might be playing finals football. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And I think they've got the hardest road of all of the teams that are still in below the line. But
Mhm.
but I if they make the final, I think here's what I predict will happen. They'll win out, or they'll win 3 out of 4. They'll get in as the 7th or 8th, and they'll get completely blown out in the elimination final. It'll be a great story for them to get in there, but I don't know how. I don't see this. If they make it into the final, I think into the top 8, it's a moral victory, and they've
Mhm.
got a good side that I think could probably do it. They got to get a lot of help, but I think it's going to take a lot of gas for them to get in and to sustain it. And I don't know that they have that yet, but it will be a building block to next year.
Mhm. In some situations, you almost go. It almost be best if they didn't, just because it keeps that hunger in them a little bit. It's that little nugget of you just feel short. You just feel short, but it'll definitely be fascinating, especially with rumors now that their chief of staff is headed over to Europe to try to hand a 5-year contract offer to Damian Hardwick. How that goes, we'll definitely have to see. We jump down to Marvel Stadium in another, what many people would call an upset. I kind of called this one. I thought this with the Ridley injury, and I was proven true. And we'll discuss a little bit more of some of the happenings that happened after this connected to the Swans. The Swans get a 2-point win, 101-99, and a game this was a track meet. The ball was zinging around, going through the goalposts. Both teams were kicking quite accurately to start off with. A fantastic game, and I love how statistically the Swans got beat in most statistical categories. The only thing they didn't get beat on was the scoreboard in the long run. A gritty performance, a win to keep their chances of the finals still afloat. There's still a faint heartbeat with a tough schedule, a tough 4 games left for the Swans. But this was one of those that if you're Essendon, you're ruining a few of your misses a little bit. But again, the defense kind of let you down a little bit. A couple of times the Swans got out the back and it really hurt them in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, both of these teams needed to win this. I mean,
Mhm.
and Essendon was in a little bit better of a position coming into the game, but um, Sydney, it seems like in the time that I've been following footy, and we're going back to the mid '90s, it always seems like they love to claw out some of these really, really close games, and you saw that here. They had a 25-point lead at three-quarter time. They were outkicked 5 goals to 1 in that final term by Essendon. And the Bombers, I mean, Kyle Langford is he is a star. He still kicked 5 goals. Peter Wright added 4 more for Essendon. A good balanced attack by Sydney. And I think that, yeah, I think this is a sort of game that good teams win. And I realize they're below the line right now, but there are Sydney teams in the past that probably would not have hung on to this win. And I would say that there are other teams around the league that are maybe in a higher position that probably don't hang on to a game like this. It's a character defining win. And whether or not that gets them into the finals, who knows at this point? But this is the sort of win that you can build upon. And I'm really, really excited to see what happens. And it's if you're a Swans fan, I think you have to be somewhat optimistic. There's still plenty of time to go. As you said, it's not a it is a challenging run home in the final 4 games.
Mhm.
Just looking to see, they've got the Sydney Derby at the
Mhm.
Showground coming up. Then they've
Gold
got
Coast
hosting Gold Coast, which of course we just saw what happened with them. Then they
at
had the
Adelaide
Adelaide,
Oval.
and then
At Adelaide
home.
Oval
Yep, and then home against the Demons.
against the D's.
Gonna be tough, but
You got to win three. You got to win 3 out of 4. And like I told somebody, I said, if the Swans make finals this year, they'll have earned it. They will have had to earn it, because most likely your three wins. I think a lot of people would bank on the Gold Coast win, but then again, no, seeing it, that's not a bank. But go to Adelaide Oval, which Adelaide at home has not lost very many at home. Melbourne coming to the SCG will be interesting, but if Melbourne keeps up the form that they're going with, that's difficult. And then this Sydney Derby it's always up in the air. As they said, I think 4 of the last 5 have ended with less than a goal as the final margin. So I mean, it's up in the air. So I mean, as a Swans fan right here, I can be as optimistic as I can, but there's a possibility the Swans could lose all 4 of the last final games. I'm crossing my fingers that doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
But I mean, there's a possibility of going 0-4 because that's how good the 4 teams left on your schedule are. So it is definitely going to be interesting watching the Swans because again, if they make finals, they will have definitely had to earn it. So we will
And
jump. Go ahead.
anything is possible if you put your mind to it, Donnie. Even
Definitely.
failure.
Definitely for sure. So we jump to it. The showdown, which usually is always a cracker game, and this one, unfortunately, not so much as a 47-point win by the Adelaide Crows, which again, if you would have covered both of the symbols and told me this was the final score, I'd have told you Port Adelaide would have won it by that score line. But boy, was I wrong as Tex Walker goes bunta in this game. But I think a lot of people, the more of the conversation is what happened with Alir Alir. I don't really want to discuss it because I think there's still a lot of facts that we don't know.
Mhm.
Am I glad that Port Adelaide has at least put their hand up and go, hey, yeah, we messed up. And Alir Leary and Lockie Jones have both went into a concussion protocol, which I think going into a game with no Tommy Hawkins doesn't hurt him as much as it would have if Tommy Hawkins was playing for Geelong this week. But again, this was a great game. I want to give love to the Port Adelaide, but I think that all of the mentions has gone to what happened with the docking staff and somehow Alir coming back onto the ground after only 6 minutes, after what is hard not to say it looked like a clear concussion.
Yeah, it we're not quite there yet in professional sports. We see this happen in other. We saw this happen in the World Cup, in the Men's World Cup last year, where I think one of the early games, one of the goalkeepers had very clearly a concussion. It took him like 10, 15 minutes before he was subbed off. I think we need to be a little bit more proactive, and I'm with you. I think that's kind of all I want to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
But as for the game itself, yeah, I think Port Adelaide got stuck behind those prison bars that they talk so much about, and coming out for this one. Yeah, Tex was 7. I mean, you can't, when he kicked 2 less than Port kicked the entire game. I think the key is that they went is how well they spread the ball out and how well that they had played, how well that they had spread against Port Adelaide. I mean, they really suffocated the power. Some of their guys really got, like Butters got his 32 touches, Houston and Rose each got their 26, but Jordan Dawson moving the ball as well as he did, and Crouch and Malera as well. Rory Laird had a really good game. Riley O'Brien controlling the ruck for 40 hitouts. Uh, it's going to be interesting. And again, Adelaide is in that pack of 6 teams that is only 4 points out. And if you look at them, they've got Gold Coast. Now, Gold Coast, they're coming off a big win. Who knows what kind of Gold Coast team they're going to have? That's at home. Then they go to the Gabba to play the Lions, a team that's coming off of a big loss against an inferior opponent. Let's be honest. Then they host Sydney, a team that is, we don't know where they're going to be at in round 23, and then they finish at Optus against West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know where they're going to be in round 24 either. Adelaide is still not very much not in this, and the way that Walker is, if Walker gets hot and 7 goals this game, they might be playing finals footy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. This is an Adelaide team. The only thing that concerns me is they're starting to pick up some injuries in their defensive line and how much depth do they have in their Sandful side? Because normally if they're playing Sandful, they're not up to AFL standard. That's why they're playing Sandful. So it'll be fascinating to see how this goes because Adelaide, I'm a little worried that they're defensively they're taking some hits where they can't really afford to. So it'll be fascinating to keep an eye on that. So we'll jump back over to Marvel Stadium in one that I honestly I put this one down, and I think I wasn't the only one that put this as an upset that didn't happen. As St. Kilda found its kicking boots and put up 122 on the Hawks, beating them by 29, 122-93. Again, the Hawks competitive, tough, but the Saints found their groove at just the right time, and they have to be probably the most unlikely fifth seed ever because nobody has confidence in a team that right now sits fifth on the ladder.
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of luck your way into a couple of wins here and there, and I think that's what the Saints have done. The Saints have been good enough, and that was the case in this game. And Hawthorn, I'm a Hawk supporter. I've been watching them as much as I have been this season. It seems like they always seem to put together like one or two good quarters, and that was kind of how it was here. The reason they even only lost by 30, I mean, they played okay in the first two terms, but then they had that half dozen in the third quarter and they were only down by 11. And you thought, well, if they still have any petrol in the tank, they might, they're going to make it close, or they might sneak up and win it. And unfortunately, St. Kilda had the bigger tank at the end and they ended up winning by 29. German MP, I the way he plays is I really love watching. Warple had 30 touches. Luke Bruce was his Luke Bruce self and kicked six. But you look at all the really again the fact that it was such a balanced attack. Dan Butler with four, Brad Crouch with three, Caminiti, Sharman, and Higgins all with a couple. Crouch with 32 touches. Wangani Malera with 33. I'm excited to watch him play. I think he's a really good pickup for this Saints side. Looking at their rest of the schedule, what do they got? So they're hosting Carlton next week, and Richmond and Geelong. So they have three straight home games. Who the hell is making the schedule? And then they head to the GABA. So I guess that kind of evens out. I don't know. They could. I mean, I don't know that they'll get in the four. I think that they're two games behind the four seed right now, which is Melbourne. And I don't know that they're good enough. I think they're strong enough to hang on to that five seat, especially over GWS. But I mean, it'll be very interesting to see if they can get a little bit of momentum again. Anything can happen. It doesn't matter. And we saw with the Bulldogs a few years ago when they won from the 7 slot. Anything can happen if you get a little bit of a fire in your belly and you make the run at the right time.
If you find your form at just the right time, anything can happen, and it's very very interesting keeping an eye on the Saints because I and maybe this is just me, but ever since some of their stars have come back, some of the creeping bad things that have happened in the previous two seasons have kind of started to rear their heads. It was almost like Ross was really good with the youngsters who he could basically kind of intimidate into doing what he wanted. And some of these old guys they haven't really accepted what Ross is saying. I don't know. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but it just seems like there's still some things there. Well, they have their great games against the Hawks team that I think they're doing some right things, and I think they'll progress as the years go on. But they are still they did have to make a few difficult decisions that I think in the long run expedited their progression up the ladder. But this year may be a little bit of pain, but that was one I kind of thought could potentially happen with the lack of form St. Kilda was on until
Mhm.
this last round. So we jump over to the MCG as the D's continue red hot form, beating the Tigers 130-98. Again, the Tigers, a good game, kind of a little bit of a lackluster performance from them. Yes, they put up 98 points, but they were fumbly at points. Dusty Martin didn't have a great game. They were just a little bit off, and the D's weren't. So, I mean, honestly, if I'm in the top four, this D's team is probably the scariest. I know Brisbane is talented. I know Port Adelaide is talented up there, but right now I think this D's team is actually probably the second best team in the comp behind the Pies.
Well, they're the only one that won, and they are of all the teams in the top four, they look the most dangerous. Um, well, obviously they were the only one that won, but I think you're right. Richmond really just didn't play a good game. I think they overachieved essentially, considering how well they played. And maybe any other team in the competition, they probably sneak out with the 4 points. But Melbourne just is a good team, and when you consider how well they've played in the last couple of years, they're still very similar to the team that won the cup a couple of years ago. So if they get anywhere they're going to finish in the top four, no matter where they land. They're still very much a threat. Viney again with 32 touches, Petraka with 29, Gone with 28 plus 40 hitouts. That is a monster game in an all round sense. Harry Petty with 6, Melksham with 4, Van Royen with 4. Their forwards were their attackers really thumping, and it must be said as much they scampered home to win by 32, but this game at the changes was really anybody's game. But again, like you said, Richmond pretty fumbly, especially in that fourth quarter. Melbourne played 4 quarters, and Richmond only played 3. 6 goals to 2 in the final quarter was what did it.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then we go to we'll make this short and sweet again. West Coast and Roos fans. I mean, no disrespect to you, but you really had to be a fan of these teams to really want to watch this one because this was, I mean, the hype on this is who was going to be worse, who was actually going to lose this game. And West Coast get another win. West Coast get a second win on the board, getting the win over North Melbourne, 72-67. And I'm gutted for the North fans because I think a lot of people kind of, I mean, they buoyed him a little bit, thinking, "Here's your chance. You're going to get another win. You finally get the losing streak over with after winning the first 2 games." And West Coast just enough experience and just enough execution to get the win.
Um, when you don't score against the West Coast Eagles in an entire quarter, I mean, I don't want to sound alarmed, but I think I just heard that they're going to be promoting Frankston to the AFL next year because and dropping North back down with their other team. Uh, the question was who was going to fall to the occasion, and it was North. You have to really feel for West Coast. I mean, this has been a truly, and I've only been on. I mean, this is only my second time on this season. I think I've lost count after one.
Second.
Again, I can't count. I can't even count to 23. You want me to count to two? Um, but you got to give the Eagles credit. They are in a very awful, no good situation, and they played a good, strong game against this. It wasn't pretty, but this is probably the best matchup they're going to have. This is going to be in terms of a team at their level, and they won. They
Mhm.
got the 4 points. It wasn't pretty. I mean, they had that little hot streak again where they outkicked them 3 goals 6 to no score in that third quarter. In what was very much again, it was back and forth at times, but and then I mean, North didn't lay down by any stretch of the imagination. They almost returned the favor. They almost turntabled the Eagles. They outscored them 27-1 in the final term. But it's been a rough season for both teams. I think if listen 38,000 people showed up and watched that game in Perth. So for a team that is playing as and mind you, not really out of their own fault. I mean, it's been said millions of times. They all the injuries, all the stuff that's happening out at West Coast, and they still got 38,000 people to show up and watch the 2 worst teams in the competition. They weren't disappointed because a home team won, but I mean, it's just yeah. Not much more you can say about that.
Yeah, and again, I mean no disrespect to either ones, but this was definitely one of those that I watched the highlights because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go through what I potentially could see again. I think it was a good game of footy. I think it was just, I mean, these two teams are relatively equal when it comes to it. Both, I think, have some building blocks. I think North's a few steps ahead. I think West Coast has just got a lot of experience. And as we're kind of as we've kind of seen over the last couple of days, their captain Shannon Hearn has announced his retirement, which again all congratulations to him after the end of the season. I think he's played fantastic for them. The man child, as I've heard him called, considering I don't think he looks like he's aged because he always looked like a 35-year-old man, even when he was 20. So it was always fascinating seeing the pictures of Shannon Hearn, even at like 18, 20 years old. He already looked like a man already. So I don't know. This is just one of those. I go, okay, congratulations, West Coast, got your second win. And North, there's a lot of question marks now. Hopefully, it sounds like Clarkson is back. He's going to be coaching the team here in the next round or so. Hopefully, things start to get better. Again, Ratton did about as best as he possibly could. I mean, I can't fault the guy for taking over last minute notice, especially considering he was doing like 2 days and still working on the farm. So they had to kind of try to find a way to continue to pay him when he went from 2 days a week to full time head coach. So my hat tip to you there, Coach Ratton, because you at least you did something that I don't think you were expecting, and I don't think you did a horrible job. I just think you were really put into a difficult situation. So
Yeah.
that is going to do it for the 9 games. Let's jump to the burning questions. And well, real quick, Brian, I'll let you know this. The last question that I had on our original script, I'm going to let go because Ross sent in his question and he kind of took my thunder. So we're going to change it just a little bit, but we'll continue the way we're going, just on mic adjustments here. So, first question, we kind of discussed this. Port Adelaide have dropped a few on the trot. This is 3 in a row. Are Should Port be worried that they're not going to get this second spot with not only the injuries, but a really, really shoddy form over the last few rounds?
It's got to be a worry, especially the way that Melbourne is playing, and I mean Brisbane. We'll see how they go down the stretch, but you do have to worry. And guess what? It means if you don't finish in the top, it's not like you've got the Crows there to kind of save you, and maybe sneak in a game at Adelaide Oval. You got to finish in the top four, or else if you want to have a sniff at having that. So yeah, I would be worried if I was them, but I wouldn't. I would be concerned, but maybe not worried. I wouldn't be panicked yet. They're still in a very strong position, and we mentioned like what their schedule is at the end, as we said, Geelong, and then home to GWS. That's going to be a tough game. I think they'll beat Geelong. I don't think Geelong's going to have much to say the rest of the season. And then at Fremantle, that's probably a win as well. And then home to Richmond, that's probably a win as well. Any of these games are trap games, but if they play the way that they've been playing most of the season and they can figure out how to change around those injuries, I think they'll be okay to at least finish in the top two.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting for sure. We jump to a second question. Upsets dominated this weekend, but for some people, they may not have liked it. But for me, I asked this: did this make this run more exciting? Considering as we look at it, and as you kind of said a couple of times in the episode, from fifth place to 14th, there is only an 8 point gap.
Yeah. And if you throw in Fremantle, let's do it just because it's a
Mhm.
12. It's a 12. I mean, and Fremantle's only 4 points behind
Gold
Adelaide,
Coast, yeah.
Essendon, and Gold Coast. I mean, is there a run? Are they going to be able to sneak in? I think they're probably not. But this is I don't. I mean, all of these teams and just 4 spots. Unfortunately, I think it means that the growing calls for the wild cards two round is going to get louder and louder. But I mean, you can't get any more exciting than this. I think there are some teams that look better than others in that grouping. I think I would predict here's my prediction. I think of and I don't know that I know enough about everything to kind of predict which teams, but of those 6 teams, I'm going to tell you right now in round 20, 6 of those teams that are currently sitting outside the 8 of those 6, 2 of them are going to sneak inside.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know enough. I don't know that I can speak to which teams will bump which, but that's the feeling that I get.
Well, a little tease for later on in the episode to honor my time with Ross. with 4 rounds left, I did a ladder predictor. I know I reached out to Brian to see if he did. I'm not sure if he did, but I did a ladder predictor, and I can sit here and tell you this. I am looking at my ladder predictor right now. There are 2 teams that are not in the 8 right now that in my ladder predictor are in the 8. Well, so we'll leave that little tease right there for the end for later on in the episode. I'll tell you who is in that is not in right now. So it'll be very interesting on that goes. So we've come to it. Ross's question of the week, and I cannot wait for this. He texted me this, so I already know this. Ross, take it away.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
The legend that is Lance Buddy Franklin is finally calling a career after 354 games, a massive 5,244 disposals, 1,066 goals. He truly is the greatest goal kicker of our generation, or of his generation. And he may, I mean, if you're going off the adjusted stats like we talked about last round, he might be the greatest goal kicker ever. But with that being said, he's had 2 halves of his career, essentially. One half with the Hawthorne Hawks, the other half with the Sydney Swans. So with that being said, gentlemen, 20 years from now, how will you and how will most people remember Lance Franklin? Will it be in the gold and brown, or will it be in the red and white? Interesting one here. I hope you guys have a great rest of the show. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in every single week. You guys are great, especially as the season winds down. Things are only heating up. Donnie, Brian, have a great rest of your show.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Thanks, Ross. A great question, especially. I love that we are going to end the burning questions on the Big Budster's retirement, and having a Hawks fan and a Swans fan here to discuss this, I think is absolutely perfect. Brian, as the Hawks fan, will Lance Franklin be remembered in the next 20 years for his time with Hawthorne or his time with Sydney?
Oh, that is a very, very difficult question. He won both of his premierships with the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
He arguably had maybe some of his best years as a player with the Swans. I would say, and then you have like the recency bias.
Mm-hmm.
That is really difficult. I'll remember him as a Hawk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying it because I'm a Hawk. Listen, Lance Franklin playing in 2008, and that 2008 team, aside of the fact that the team I played for in the U.S. is called the Philadelphia Hawks, was one of the reasons I became a Hawks supporter.
Mm-hmm.
So in my, I always see him as red and white. I think I consider him to be a Hawk, but that would also disrespect, I think, the fact that he had played so well, and he really meant a lot to those Swans clubs over the last decade. And make no mistake, they've played the Swans have had a lot of good runs in the last couple of years, and he's indelibly a part of it. I don't know that he has to pick one or the other. I mean, I guess if you're talking about like in terms of Hall of Fame, like the Baseball Hall of Fame, they only put like one hat on you. But I don't know. I feel like he had more success with the Hawks, but he had a better team. I would that's a very difficult question, and I don't know. I don't know. In my mind, I think he's a Hawk.
And here's the thing for me. I love the question, but I hate the question because I think he can be equally respected and
Yes.
remembered for on both sides, because I completely agree with you. His 2 premierships were with the Hawks. His early days and the 100 goals that he kicked were with the Hawks. But his end of the career and being able to go up to Sydney, being able to enjoy his footy without the fishbowl of Melbourne, and then to kick 1,000 goals last year, and that amazing visual of the fans rushing the field in Sydney, it's going to be iconic. So I think there are moments like his goal in the elimination final against Adelaide Crows when he was only like 20 years old, early in his career, is one of those iconic moments. His leaping over a Collingwood player in the center square and kicking a goal for Hawthorn. His kicking 1,000 goals up in Sydney. His ability to take over and kick 10 goals against Carlton in one of those games. His game against Port Adelaide, where he didn't do bugger all for the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, goes Bunta, kicks 4 goals, and helps Sydney jump over Port Adelaide 2 years after he signed his contract. So I think there are equal enough moments he'll be remembered for both. And I think Hawks fans will remember him for the time he was with there. And Swans fans will remember him for what he did for Sydney footy and for footy at the Swans. I think there's enough that he'll be remembered for both. If you twist my arm and force me, I think many people are going to remember him as a Swan because they're going to the recency bias of 1,000 goals, and that being the probably what potentially could be the last ever. But I can see your argument too, is that he won his premierships and he kicked 100 goals, which is never going to happen ever again with Hawthorn. So it's like I honestly think they could share him because I think both clubs love him just as much. Like you talk to Hawks fans and Swans fans, there was that rivalry there for the early 2000 for the late 2000s, around 2011 through 16 basically. But there's a lot of respect there because we both got to have the big man, Big Bud, on our team during some really good times and some really good memories. So I think he'll be loved by both fan bases as their own, but I think he could be shared. It's almost like, could you make the jersey half red and white and half brown and gold?
Let's look at it this way. Yeah, I mean, do like Gaylord Perry when he was playing for 9 MLB teams. Just like let's just put all the colors of the rainbow on there. I think the other thing, Donnie, is you have to remember this. Both clubs. I mean, Hawthorn, for many years when they came into the what is now the AFL, had a dry patch up until the late 70s, the mid to late 70s on through the 80s and the 90s, those years where they made the grand final, all those years in a row when they made the grand final, 7 years in a row, and then 8 out of 9. And when they had that run of 15 years or 14 years of making the finals.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, the best run that they've had, from 2008 when they won the grand final all the way to 2015 when they won the last, and then they kind of petered out after that. He was their best player for all of those years, with the exception of the last 2 premierships.
Mm-hmm.
Sydney / South Melbourne, a team that, unless around World War One and for a brief period in the 1930s, if you put that aside, was largely ineffectual. And then all of a sudden, right around the mid 90s, when you had Tony Lockett and all those other players, but their biggest string of success has all come in I would say from 2011. They won the premiership in 2006 or 2005. They made the finals the next year, or the grand final again the next year, and of course lost to West Coast. But for most of that stretch, from they only missed the finals. I'm looking at it here. So
19, 20, and then potentially this year. It's just, if they missed this year, it'd be only the third time since 2011.
So since 1996, they've only missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Yep.
That is going back 28 seasons. They've
Mm-hmm.
only missed a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
In recent years, in the last decade, he has been, if not the best player, the most important player, one of the most important players on this team. So the fact that he had held that role for 2 different clubs at 2 very, what will be remembered 20 years from now when we're trying to make this decision, and I'm, telling kids to get off my lawn. That, to me, I think, I don't know that it's fair. I don't know that. I mean, I'm with you. It's a great question, not really a great question to answer, especially as a fan of one of the teams. Because again, as a Hawks supporter, I recognize how much, and think about this as well. Sydney, to those of you who don't know anything about Australian sports, Sydney has long been a rugby stronghold. It has taken a lot for the Swans to get the foothold that they've had in Sydney. And it's not just been the premierships in 2005 when they won the first one in 72 years, but keeping that, and their success has, it hasn't pulled, when you say football in Sydney, you're still talking rugby league, but in a place where the sport is still playing second fiddle, to have a personality and a player like that the type of human being he is, and the type of footballer he is, I think Sydney football needed that. The sport in Sydney needed that. And so I think he'll be remembered in that way, from that perspective, as a Swan. But that was a terrible question, Roston.
I don't think it's a terrible question.
No.
It's just one of those.
It's difficult.
It puts
it's
you
very
into
difficult.
It puts you into pretzels, because I think both you and I have the same problem. Is that you don't want to come off as biased for your own team, but you can see both. Like I said, you can see both sides. Completely understand your side. You completely understand your argument. And like I said, I think he'll be remembered almost 50-50, because there are so many big things that happen for both clubs, that I think there is an argument that he really can be remembered for both, not just one, because I think it would be disrespecting his time at the other to do so.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I kind of approach it. I respect the Hawks organization and what they did with him, and Luke Bruce, and Haji, and Roughhead, and Sil Rioli. I mean, you look at that team there. I mean, 2008 kind of came a little early for them, and then they found their groove, and they were almost unbeatable at times. It was the point where it's dynasties are one of those where everybody eventually starts hating you because they get tired of you winning. So it's one of those where there's a respect factor for what they did with that group. And yes, it's kind of stung for many Hawks fans to lose Buddy, but I think what Buddy did at Sydney is something it's hard to do. Plugger Lockett did it. Now the question is, with Lance going off, who's the next marquee guy that may go up there to kind of keep the marquee signing up with Sydney? We'll definitely have to see, because honestly, I think there's a lot of young stars on the Sydney team that I don't know if they have to sign a marquee guy. I think they'll be just fine, but that's that's a little bit of me in the weeds a little bit there. So we jump to it as I kind of the part of the podcast where I kind of take over just a little bit. Brian, you know all about it. Team of the week for this round. We'll jump to it. The defenders, and again, I've kind of made it now to where I've got lines and I've got them in the best positions I possibly can. Starting in the fullback line, Carlton's Jacob Wiedering, GWS's Sam Taylor, and Sydney's Harry Cunningham. And the halfback line sees the Western Bulldogs Bailey Dale, St. Kilda's Nesaya and Wangani Millera, and West Coast Jaden Hunt. In the mids, on the wings, sees Errol Goulden of the Sydney Swans and the Gold Coast Ben Ainsworth. In the center, sees the Western Bulldogs Adam Trelaw, Hawthorns Will Day, and St. Kilda's Brad Crouch. At the ruck, big Tim English from the Western Bulldogs. At forward, at the half forward line, sees Carlton's Charlie Curnow, Toby Green of the GWS Giants, and Harrison Petty going forward and kicking a few goals. So he gets the nod for the Melbourne Demons at the half forward line. The full forward line, Gold Coast Ben King, Adelaide's Tex Walker, and Hawthorns Luke Bruce. Jumping to the bench, sees defender from the Essendon Bombers Nick Hind, the ruck from North Adelaide, North Adelaide. Oh my God, I'm doing Sandful teams now. North Melbourne's Tristan Geary. Midfielder from the Richmond Tigers, Caden McIntosh, and the forward from the Essendon Bombers, Kyle Langdon, rounds out my team of the week. A very interesting group, because the one thing is, with the forwards, you had to kick at least 4 goals, I think it was, just to even have a shot. And he, in this forward line, a ton of goals kicked by some forwards this week.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen so many people kick 5-6 goals or more. It really did. And it's funny because we didn't see a lot of, I mean, we saw a couple of high scores. I don't know that we saw the astronomical scores that we've seen. In fact, only
122 by St. Kilda, I think, was I think the highest of the
no,
round.
it was Melbourne's
130. Yeah.
That was it.
190. Yeah. So it's like the first few games, the highest was 93. 71, 78, 96, 101, 112, 122, 130, 72. So the winning margins for the most part weren't 100-point scores except for 3 games. So
Well, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of goals kicked, but
4 games, my bad.
not a lot of scoring. I mean, there are a decent amount of scoring shots, but looking at some of the teams that kicked, I mean, Gold Coast kicked 15 goals, 6.
Mhm.
They only had one more than Brisbane, but Brisbane kicked 7 goals, 13 as an example. You mentioned
Mhm.
Collingwood at the very beginning, kicking 10 goals, 16. They had 26 scoring shots to Carlton's 23, and they lost by 17 points.
Mhm.
But anyway,
Bad kicking is bad football. I keep hearing it and it keeps proving itself. So we jump to
if
the power rankings, and this is going to be fun for me because I know this is going to cause controversy if people see this because at number 5, the Collingwood Magpies. At number 5, number 4, the Sydney Swans. Number 3, the Melbourne Demons. Number 2, the Carlton Blues. At number 1, the GWS Giants. So of the last 5 games, that's how I do my, again, if comment section, I can't wait to hear your explanation of why I'm a flog and I can't get it right. But hey, I give you my metric every week. Last 5 rounds, what have you done for me lately? Power rankings. That's how I do it. And wins in a row start you off, and then we go from there. So I give you my metric. I always try to stay to that as much as I possibly can. So, as I teased a little bit earlier, with usually we did 5 rounds, but this year I didn't have a chance to do it with 5 rounds left. So this year I'm doing it with 4. I did the ladder predictor, which I think is a ton of fun to do at this time of the year. So Brian, did you get a chance to do the ladder predictor? Because if you didn't, I at least have one for us.
no, I have a small human, and I was getting new paint and new carpet on the house, and I also have a game that I have to get ready for in Wisconsin, which, if you'll allow me, I'd like to talk to you about for 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, before we do the ladder predictor, for those of you that maybe this is
Oh.
their first time listening to it, he is the media manager and one of the best callers in North America when it comes to calling footy, and he has the luxury of calling the 49th Parallel Cup as Team USA and Team Canada, the men's teams at least for this weekend, lock horns. Brian, take it away.
Oh, hi. I didn't realize I was going to do it now, but that's okay. We'll do it now. Um, so the 49th Parallel Cup is, as Donnie said, it goes all the way back to 1999. It was one of the first regularly contested international representative Aussie rules matches. The USA men's team, the Revolution, and the Canadian men's team, the Northwind, first did battle in 1999. They have done it pretty irregularly since. It would be once every couple of years, essentially. They do it 2 years on, 1 year off. Anyway, it's back on American soil for the first time in 8 years, since 2015, at the Score Complex in Racine, Wisconsin. The U.S. and Canada, as we said, this is the 12th matchup. The record is 10 for the U.S. and 1 for Canada. The overall record, this is the 18th time, including the International Cup and the Transatlantic Cup, from 2001. And the U.S. leads the series 16-1 at this point. And the last time that the two teams played, it actually might be 17-1. I have to double check. Last season up in Toronto, the U.S. defeated Canada, so they're looking to return. And since I probably won't be talking to you in a couple of weeks, the women play in 2 weeks' time on August 19th. That's the USA Freedom and the Canada Northern Lights. Now, these two teams started playing in 2007. And that's how long that has gone on. This is the 8th time that these two teams have played. Canada has won 5 out of the 8, 5 out of the 7. Again, math, not good right now. But Canada has done well. They have not met in a parallel cup since that 2015 encounter in Florida that the Canadians won. And they have not met at all since Canada defeated the U.S. in the semifinal of the 2017 AFL International Cup. The U.S. has not played a game at all since that 2017 match. So this will be the first time for the official U.S. women's representative team. Each set of games will also include a reserve match. We are working towards getting those matches live and streamed. Check out our social media, usafl.com, facebook.com/USAFL, and on YouTube and all of the other stuff. We're even on Threads at USAFL 1997. Okay, I'm done.
Fantastic. And I will make sure, for those of you that do follow me, that don't follow the USAFL, I will make sure and tag any of those to let you know. For the Australians, it's probably going to be over the late night, but we will try to make sure that we get that out to you, or at least make sure that you see the chances to see some of these fantastic players. I know I have at least 2 guys who play for the team that I coach, the Des Moines Roosters, playing in the regular one. And I've got a few that are going to probably play in the reserves match as well. They're going up as well. So super excited that the Des Moines Roosters are well represented on there. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming and the prediction ladder. So here it is. Here is my 8. I will start at 1. I will go to 6, and then I will stop for the last 2, and then tell you the 2 teams that just fell short. So at 1, kind of expected this, the Collingwood Magpies. Number 2, I have the Melbourne Demons coming in at number 2 with 68 points. Port Adelaide slips to 3rd, also with 68 points, a superior percentage by the Ds. In 4th, the Brisbane Lions. 5th, the Carlton Blues, and 6th, the GWS Giants. So here is where all the drama happens. Coach, how did he do? We jump to 10th. Who is the second team to fall short of making the finals? That would be the defending premiers, the Geelong Cats. At number 9 sees the Western Bulldogs fall just the tiniest bit short. Percentage is what gets the Doggies. And in 7th and 8th sees the Richmond Tigers and Adelaide Crows slip in at 8th. So that is Crows 8, Richmond Tigers 7, GWS, Carlton, Brisbane, Port, Melbourne, and Collingwood, according to my predictor, will be fighting for a premiership this year. For those of you that wanted to know, where did I put Sydney? Unfortunately, I have them finishing 13th. Unfortunately, I think 3 strong opponents may get them. I'm crossing my fingers I'm wrong, but if I'm following my predictions, that I think they're just going to fall short, with Essendon being 12th and St. Kilda dropping all the way to 12th from 5th after these last 4 games. So we jump to it. We'll do the tips, which will kind of give away a little bit on how some of these results ended their way. So here we go, Brian. Tipping for this round. We're just a little bit over 24 hours from the teams for this weekend. So Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium hosting the Tigs. Who do you like in this one?
Western Bull. I like the Bulldogs because the Tigers are kind of fading. The Bulldogs aren't doing that much better, but like in terms of run of form, but I like the Doggies.
I'm the opposite. I have the Tigers because I think the Tigers played a really good D's team. I think the Doggies, I think they slipped up an opportunity to beat a Giants team. I think they're playing well, but I don't think the Giants team are as good as Melbourne. And I think the Tigers played much better. Marvel Stadium, fast deck. I think it really helps them out. The biggest question will be is how do the Doggies fight back with Josh Bruce tearing his ACL? So that's one more defensive player out of the Doggies lineup. I think the Tigers capitalize on that, but I still think this is a cracker on Friday, and I absolutely can't wait for this one. Jump out to Marvel Stadium. Essendon win this one. I think Essendon win it. I think Eagles got some positive momentum, but having to come across to Marvel Stadium, I think it's not a good combination for them. I got the Eagles. I got the Bombers.
Yeah, the West Coast is playing a much better team, and also Essendon. This game means a lot to Essendon. I don't think this is going to be a Sydney level beatdown, but Essendon should win this pretty comfortably, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Adelaide Oval as the Adelaide Crows host the Gold Coast Suns. Who do you like in this one?
I like the Crows. I think they're buoyed. Listen, the 2 teams coming off of big wins yesterday, this past round against top 4 opposition teams that they were expected to lose. I like the Crows. I think I kind of side with the home team. Gold Coast I think it's going to be a good game. Let's put it this way. I think the Crows will get up just simply because I think they got the home advantage.
I'm with you. I have the Crows on this one, but this is the one I keep an eye on because I worry, are the Crows taking injuries? They've got 3 injuries in their defensive line in the last couple of weeks. And like I said, how is their depth going to handle stepping up from Samford to AFL? If Gold Coast wins this one, the Crows are in trouble. I'll say it that way. I think the Crows win this one. They're at home, but Gold Coast is a sneaky chance. This is my keep an eye on a potential upset. I'm not tipping it, but I think there's a possibility that the Suns kind of spoil the Crows a little bit. So, all right, we move to it. Also at the MCG as Hawthorne host the Collingwood Magpies. Pies are playing really, really well. Hawthorne, this is one as pesky as this Hawks team is. I just think this is a mountain a little bit too tall. I have the Pies in this one.
I'm going Hawthorne, not
I
because
love
I'm
it.
not because I'm a Hawks supporter. That only has maybe just an infinitesimal thing to do with it, maybe about 40%. No, I think they're listen. I think they're playing. I kind of feel like this is a trap game for Collingwood. Coming off of this loss, they'll be mad. They'll be pissed. I think they'll play them very tough. But I think Hawthorne again. Hawthorne, if they can play 4 full quarters of footy, I think they're due for it. I think they're due to have an effort. And listen, we've seen what happened. The top 3 teams last week all lost. So I don't lose any money or anything. I just look kind of silly, and I look silly and I sound silly to begin with. I mean, I have a voice for radio and a face for radio after all. So I'm adept at doing and saying silly things. So we'll keep it that way. And I'm going to say Hawthorne in an upset special.
Hey, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think if you can catch Collingwood by surprise, especially if they're still in their heads about last week losing that game, definitely a possibility there. A fun one down at GMHBA Stadium is Geelong host Port Adelaide. Neither team playing really well. I'm going to tip Port in this one because I think the losses that Geelong took, I think, are deadly for this one. As much as I love Jeremy Cameron, if Cameron can't get the ball because Blitzovs is a really big cog missing out of the midfield, I think Port Adelaide, yes, they're losing Lear, but I think losing Hawkins, I think neutralizes. That's not as big a loss. I don't think Jones is as big a loss. I think Port's midfield is going to have a field day in this one. I don't. It'll be fascinating to see how Geelong's defenders defend the multiple-headed monster that is Port. I think Port win this one. It's a cracking game, but I think Port just a few too many superstars in the midfield, I think, is what changes this game.
Cats lose and their season goes down the drain with it, spinning counterclockwise, just like it does in Rand McNally. No, you said it. You had it right on the head. I think Port's midfield is better. I think I think Geelong's injuries are going to catch up with them, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think both teams are going to be pissed for losing last week, and I think Port picks up the win on the road.
Yeah, I think the injuries and both the big injuries neutralize themselves. So I think it's not going to be as I would be scared if Hawkins was playing and Allaire wasn't, or if Allaire was playing and Hawkins isn't. I would be more scared, but they're both out, so I think it's a neutral. So up to Giants Stadium, Sydney Derby. We don't call it the Battle of the Bridge because they don't actually have to cross the bridge to face each other. As the Giants face the Swans. As much as I am a diehard Swans fan, this one scares me because Dane Rampy is also out along with Justin McInerney, both with calf injuries like the big Bud Boudoir. Unfortunately, I think that is a death nail for the Swans with Toby Green on the other side. I think the Giants win this one. I'm going to try the reverse psychology, tip against the Swans and hope they win.
Yeah, sometimes that's what we call around here Negadelphian. It's just like, well, if you expect if you hope, if you prepare for the worst and hope for the best, that sort of thing. I agree. I think the Giants will win. I think as much as the Swans have been playing as well as they have, I think it'll be a lot closer than many people are expecting. I think it'll be probably less than 2 goals. Sydney's a good side. I think GWS, the way that Green is playing and Canelio is playing, I think they'll get it. I forgot to mention when we were talking about that Brisbane Gold Coast, since we're talking about the names of rivalries, forget this Q Clash stuff. It's the Pineapple Grapple.
I was trying not to go there. I really was trying not to go there.
Well, that's why I'm here, to go where you won't.
I truly appreciate it. All right, we'll go from that lovely lyrical situation. We'll go to Blundstone Arena down in Tassie as North Melbourne host Melbourne. As much as I would love to see the insanity that would ensue if North Melbourne win this one, I think the D's just too good in this one. So D's for me.
Yeah, D's for me as well. This is the battle of Melbourne and not Melbourne.
That is great. All right, we jump over to Marvel Stadium as again the most disrespected 5 seed in the history of sport. St. Kilda Saints host the Carleton Blues. Can the Saints pick up a shocking win, or are the Blues' form continues to expand?
I'm going to ride the blue wave and tell you that it's going to be that's going to be the Blues. I think this is another one. This is going to be very difficult to pick. I think this is going to go right down to the final term. I think Carlton has a little bit more. I think they have a little bit better ball movement. I think that just the way they've played, and again, I think this is a matter of form, and I think this is a matter of just the way they've played. I think they've just been a little bit sharper over the last few rounds. I think it's going to be a cracking game. I wish I was there at Marvel to see it, but I'm happy to wake up at well, let's see, it's a 1:20 start. It's a little bit later for me. I may very well still be awake. I'll be in my hotel room in Wisconsin, still awake
Mhm.
to maybe watch this one on Sunday morning.
Well, if you're
But
in
I,
Wisconsin, it'll be at 12:20 your
oh
time.
yes, that's absolutely right,
You lose an hour once you pass Indiana.
bro. Look, I just so you know, this summer so far, I've been in Kansas City and Seattle, and I'm going to Wisconsin twice in 3 weeks, and then I'm going to Florida, which is in the same time zone I'm in. But still, I don't know whether I'm coming or going anymore. So it's just
Well,
I'm just
12, it'll be 12:20 your time since you'll be in the central time zone, just like yours truly. I think this is a cracking game. I think the
yeah.
Blues just a little too much. I'm fascinated. Cal Wilkie, Dougal Howard versus Charlie Curnow, and Charlie Curnow's in fuego form right now.
Yeah.
But I like Motlop. I think there's enough there. I think defensively, Jacob Wiedering is playing really, really well. I think he can handle Ben King. I just think the midfield, it'll be fun to see Pitt, Netrow, and Marshall in that ruck battle. I think it'll be fascinating. But Cripps is starting to find his form. Chair is playing really well. I'm liking the ball movement now for Carlton. They stopped with this sideways crap and started attacking and getting after it. I think this is going to test St. Kilda. I think it's just going to be a little too much. I got the Blues in this one. Jump out to Optus Stadium, Fremantle, Brisbane Lions. 6 weeks ago, I would have tipped Fremantle and not even batted an eyelash. Yes, they beat Fremantle, but yes, they beat Geelong, but this is a much bigger animal. I think Brisbane finally kind of gets their heads out of their rear ends on a road trip. I think they get the win here. I think it's close because again, they always put Fremantle and West Coast always play Optus Stadium well. I think Brisbane win this, but I think this is a tight one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think coming off of last week, I mean, this is one of these like how do you respond to a big loss to an inferior team? Do you curl up in the fetal position and cry, or do you just take out a 2x4 and take it out on the poor schmucks that you have to play next week? And I
Mhm.
think that's what the Lions will do. I'm with you though, Donnie. I think the Dockers they tend to play home. This is one of the longest road trips in the league. And I think that the Lions are battle tested. I think it'll be a close game. I think this will be a close game for 3 quarters, and the Lions will run away in the fourth. The Dockers are my second team, so it's it was a long story, but I think the Lions win. But I think this will be I think this will be an entertaining matchup as well.
Yeah, it's a great climactic game for this one because I think this could be a fantastic game if played well. Like I said, Fremantle's got to come to the party because until Geelong, they had a couple of really absolute stinkers. So I hope that really comes true. So Brian, that is going to do it. That is all 9 games covered. A bunch of things to talk about. So much fun. We got the USAFL in, which I think we almost always do whenever we chat, but it's a perfect timing with the Parallel Cup again. Keep an eye on our socials. Keep an eye on USA at USAFL 1997 for links and all of that. Game times. We'll try to be sure that we get the Australian time frame. So if any of you want to keep track of international footy from the US between the USA and Canada, a heated rivalry between these two countries. It's going to be a classic game. Usually, always is a fantastic one. Keep an eye on that. Brian, again, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Donnie. And just really quickly on that, the game time is a 11 a.m. start time in in Wisconsin. So from Eastern time, so we're talking about a 2 a.m. start for the regular game, and I want to say a 6 a.m. start on Sunday morning. However, irrespective of it, we'll have the game hopefully within several hours of its completion. So even if don't want to wake up to watch the match, we'll be able to have it for you on replay. So, but again, thank you, Donnie. I appreciate chatting the footy with you.
Always fun. You and there are several people that I know of that are your fellow footy heads like me. I love sitting down having a chat, and I know I've got a few friends who have found the podcast that I think they love hearing two Americans talk about footy with so much passion and so much joy. So I always love sharing it with them. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our podcast again today. Keep an eye out. More content coming out. I'm working on it. I may have some Waffle women's chats still coming up, some player chats still to come, and some more Sandful, and hopefully some VFL chats still to come, along with prepping for AFLW. Cannot wait. And a huge announcement as AFLW Fantasy has come. I've already set up my team. Brian, are you going to set up a team for AFLW Fantasy?
If I remember, I'm gonna set one up.
I know our great friend Peter Holden has already started a league. I've joined it. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. I set up my team earlier today.
What's it called? I want to know. What is your team
I
called?
do all my fantasy teams, including my fantasy team I play over here. I kind of do an homage. I call them the D Hess Roosters. So to kind of keep on to it, I always keep the Roosters nickname for the thing here, and then connect it with me because I can't call it Des Moines. It's kind of awkward. So the D Hess Roosters on AFLW Fantasy and Peter Holden's league that he has, the War Football League. I'm super excited to keep track of that. I play the men's fantasy with 11 other Americans here in the States, and we have a fun time. I'm hoping one day we'll be able to do AFLW fantasy via draft, which I think would be fantastic.
Fun fact: that's what D Hess is. What Des Moines is in German. I made that up.
I was like, if that's true, I'm gonna laugh so
No,
hard.
I don't. I don't know. I don't know much. I don't know much German other than ja and nine and it's past and whatever it's past my bedtime is in German.
Yeah.
It's past the bedtime.
All righty. So
Say
that's
goodnight,
going to do
Donnie.
it for our podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. We will be back again very, very soon with another episode of Donnie's Dispo.